Okay, guys, thanks for getting through that last video. I thought it was going on 10 minutes, but it's actually more like 20, so good job on that. We are going to take it a little bit easier. We're just going to do real quick file reading, which I think is very valuable because, you know, you can be defining all your variables and objects in your script itself, but that makes your script very not very dynamic. If you're building it for someone else, you have to teach them how to use it and how to insert their own stuff. It's not a good long-term solution. I've mentioned this before, I think, but I will leave text files, or later on we'll get into reading Excel files to get the information from the user about what they want to. Well, I do a lot of knock work and we're monitoring systems. So what I'll do is I'll have a text file like this, and the user can define what they want to watch, or a directory, or some location, or some information that I need for the program, but I don't necessarily want it defined in the script itself because I want to be able to add things or remove things, or that server's offline this week, so make it a little more flexible without editing the script every single time. So file reading is a good way to start that. We'll also look at file writing if we have time. And there's two ways to do it. Probably the simplest way is with this command, loop read filed contents. The way you do that is you enter a normal loop, which we haven't covered, but this should kind of do it for us. Read, you have to just define the word read, and then the input file, the output file. So as you can see, the read one, this parameter must read the word read. Lower caps, or just like this, is fine. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to read this file. I think I already showed it to you once. It's got some directories in there. And let's go ahead and put that into an array. So go ahead, and first we need to define our array. So let's just say, let's do the same server's array, or what was it, server array. And we are just making that as a blank variable. All right. And in there, I am going to do a label, even though I don't have to. I mentioned last time the idea of A index. And A index, I mentioned this briefly, but I'll go over it again. When you go into a loop, every time you go into a loop, A index is going to be assigned a new value. The first time you go through the loop, it's going to be assigned the number 1. The second time is number 2, the third time number 3, etc. And that kind of is self-explanatory. The only thing I'd mention is some programming languages, if you've been in the C++ world, might start at 0. AutoHotkey starts at 1. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to define our own x in here as well. I'm going to say x++. And I have to say x is maybe equal to 0 out here, so that when it goes into this array, x is incrementing by 1. You can also do x plus equals to 1, or maybe you need to do plus equals to 50. So I'll just leave it at x++. I think you can also do negative numbers if you're looping through some kind of game and take damage or something. Okay, but we've got this incomplete. So the input file, a scripter. I don't think I've mentioned this, but scripter is your original script is in a directory. Scripter is that directory that your original script is in, for the most part. Output file is an optional one. It's in brackets here. We don't need it. I've never used it. I don't know why you would read a file and then immediately write it out somewhere. And I mean, output file, blah, blah. Maybe you, okay, that might be useful, but that's pretty advanced. Actually, I accidentally clicked on file append, but we're going to need that later, so I'll just hold on to it. Okay, so server array A index, if this doesn't make any sense, go ahead and review the last lesson if you can. Otherwise, let's keep going. If you're still not grasping objects super strong, don't worry about it. Once we start building our tool, I think we're going to build kind of a game bot kind of idea just to keep people interested, and it's simple, and I've already done half of it. So, or we might just do something more work related with Excel. But let's say data dir. And when you read a file, oh, I didn't finish this. The file name was data feed dirs, I think. Like that. So we'll loop through, and what this does is each loop it's going to read another line. So each line of that is one piece of information. So every time it reads it, this value will be essentially doing this. A file read line, what is it? I don't quite remember. I'm just looking over at the documentation on another screen. I always forget this variable because it's quite long. Oh, there it is. Oh no, that's not it. There it is, I see it. Every time you read a line, it's basically going to do this. Is now equal to that first line. It's essentially doing that on its own, behind the scenes. So every time we read, every line, go into the array that amount. X++, just increment x by 1. That is not really doing anything for us, but I'll show it to you afterwards. Message box 1. Message box, the value of x. So if there's 4 lines in that file, what do you think x is going to be? Probably 4, right? Misarrays. I included this file for something I thought we would get to, but okay. I'll just comment it out because I can't quite remember the file name. Okay, so what happened was we went through there 4 times, we got the 4. The other way, well, let's go ahead and show you that. Let's look at that object. There. We've got 4 different arrays, or 4 different elements in the array, and each one is labeled data dir, and it's getting this value, the line of text in that file. So that's a good way to be reading files. There's another way that I use for some other cases, mainly maybe reading a long text file, and it looks, I'll show you that now. The way I do that is with a different command called file read. This is going to read the entire contents of the selected file into one variable. Remember lesson 1 I said you can put a whole file in that variable? Yes, you can. I don't have a super long one, so we'll probably just use the same one. But I use this style more for reading a long text file that I don't really need a lot of information out of. And the way you do this one is server array string split. I think this command is new, so if you're running an old version, you might run into a problem here. You need to go to ahscript.org and get the current version. So string split, let's look at the documentation for that. Split, there you are. We're basically doing this way. There is a command that you can write the whole thing out, but that's kind of old. This requires a later version. So let's do it this way. The string is going to be the memory file, the entire thing, all of the text in there. And the delimiters is, yeah, this is optional. The delimiter is basically what is in between each line. Well, the way we can define a new line in Notepad files, we're going to have problems if this, you use this. I believe it's this. Might be the other way around. But I'll go ahead and try it here. One moment. Because I'm doing it this way, this one that we created before is going to be completely overwritten. So this will still work as long as we remove this and remove this. Legal character. 39? I think what it's saying is it doesn't know quite what we're talking about. There we go. Except my delimiter wasn't quite right. Let's try it this way. Okay, there we go. I think this is return or new line. I can't quite remember, honestly, and I'm not going to look it up in the middle of recording. Let's look at that array again. So here we got kind of the same exact thing. It's 4 entries, and they're all separated by one line. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Basically, in between each of these is a new line and I forget what it's called. It's like a return key or something. But you can imagine in between each line here is this, or actually wasn't it this way? That it's just the encoding type of the text or something that tell it, oh, there's a new line here. And the way that Notepad writes it is with 2 of those, I guess, for clarity. But if we open the same file and say Notepad or this, I guess that works too. Now I've gone and lost my thing. There we go. I'll just close this. So that's kind of that. That's what I wanted to work on here. Oh, you know what? We still have to do file appending. File append the text that you want to output. So let's just say file line. Let's say new file. Encoding is optional. We don't need that. Or let's say .txt. And maybe what we want to do here is I'm kind of jumping ahead. I'm trying to get this video done. Is if you're collecting a lot of data, maybe you want to write it out. Maybe you have an error log or something. So let's just call this error log. And every time you run into some case, you want to write out some data. Maybe you want to write, let's just write a text like, there was an error at a built-in variable to AutoHotkey is a/now. It's like the entire date and time and minute and millisecond practically. Well, not millisecond actually. So we can do that. When this is encountered, it'll write out to a file. So I use that more I do use it in an error log. So we'll go ahead and give that a shot. Hit this first, pause the script. Should end now. Yeah, there's an exit app. So now if we look in our thing, we should have an error log.txt. There should be one. Okay, you see what happened here is we didn't quite do this right. Let's try that one more time. That should be right, because I guess it assumes text itself is not assuming expressions. So this should work. And the one thing to know about file append is it's appending the file. It's not going to overwrite the entire file. So let's go ahead and run that. Now here's an interesting thing. It put it on the same line, right? Why is that? Well, we didn't specify that new line thing. So let's go ahead and do that as well. We'll say new line every time. Let's just run this a few times. Now when we look at it, each one is on its own line. Is that starting to make sense? Alright, I think that's going to be it for now. I think we went a little bit overboard again, but I'm sure you're just watching these one after another, doing every assignment, so that's good, right? My name is Chunji. I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you guys for paying attention, being here, pushing through. Good on ya.